Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is January 24th, 2023 at 4:32 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Strader, Councilman Overton, Councilwoman Perot.
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Borton.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next time up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
there are no changes for this evening's agenda, so I move approval of the agenda as published. Second.
Motion a second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of the consent agenda and for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
Motion a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to action items. First item up is item 7, which is a public hearing for proposed 2023 Lakeview Golf Course fee schedule. I will open this public hearing with staff comments from Jake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Just a few quick house cleaning items regarding this fee schedule that you have before you this evening. The non-resident senior couple restricted pass, that number that you see before you, it reads $1,145. That is a mistake on my part. That price, that new fee needs to be $2,145. And there is another fee that I caught this afternoon. The non-resident junior add-on that currently reads at $530. That needs to be $330. And we did check with Bill this afternoon. He said that there was no need to publicly put these fees out again, and we can just have a quick discussion on those if need be.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Jake, I appreciate the clarification. It sounds like it's just that. The figure as corrected is the figure that we talked about in December, so it should match what we've been addressing publicly anyway. Okay.
A little bit of a backstory about the rest of these fees. The non-resident golf pass fees, what we did is we just took our current fees and we did a 10% increase of those. And that's where we arrived at the non-resident fees for the golf passes. And the other fees that you see on the list, those are a 4% increase of what is currently out there. We're here seeking a 4% increase on those prices as well. Highlighted by a reduction of the trail pass. And that is currently sits at, I believe it's $590, and we are seeking to change that to, $580, and we're seeking to change that at a 50% reduction of $290.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Neri.
real quick, okay, so we'll correct the reso since it's on here. I can't get that corrected right now. But I missed the second one that was off. I got the first one. First non-resident senior couple would be $2,145, not $1,145. Non-resident junior add-on
Yes,
should be what number?
$330.
$330.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Jake, question. So I'm a resident. I was just looking here and I'm just not seeing it. It's probably right in front of me. What would my golf pass fee be as a resident?
So a single limited, you want the unlimited single resident pass?
Sure.
That is $1,749.
Okay. I'm online here. I was looking at the attachment and I see nothing about residents. Everything's non-resident.
Yeah, so there's no changes to those resident.
Okay,
golf.
this is just the changes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just did the 10%.
That's right.
increase for a
Okay,
non-resident.
these just show the changes.
Yep. That's correct.
Councilman Strader.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering what's the harm in, just waiting a week, correcting it, and then approving the resolution in case someone was reviewing an attachment that was incorrect? Is there any overarching timing consideration or reason that we couldn't just correct it
There was
give
not.
the public time in case they were looking at that one attachment.
Not from our seat. I mean, we're more than happy to do that. So
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
one of the logistical things, which might not be that big of a deal, was because people are buying some of these things now, that they are paying perhaps a little higher fee, knowing they're going to get a refund back in a week or two for whatever adjustment there is. So probably not a lot of folks. But that really was the only,
at this point, I don't think we
Logistics.
have any of those sold. So
Oh. perfect.
So maybe they're waiting
they could be. Yeah.
for that. It would be 2 weeks. We don't meet next week. This is a, FYI.
Do as directed, whatever.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Caver.
I don't have typically a problem with kicking these out a couple weeks, but where we don't have a meeting next week, it has tracked with what we have talked about. It's narrowly focused. I'm supportive if we want to move forward, if the council wants to hold off for 2 more weeks, I'm not opposed to it. I just think that it's so narrowly focused that I think that we would be okay with moving forth. We haven't typically don't get any, I think of the years I've been on council, we've never had anybody come and comment on a fee ever when it comes to the Parks Department. So I don't feel like that we are trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. I mean, this was a small clerical mistake. We're publishing the fees. I think we're okay to move forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
how long before they officially go into effect?
That is a great question. I could get with Ryan with that. So our next plan is to get these adopted. Then go get the signs changed, the literature changed, get everything on the website and launch whatever that turnaround time is that we can get a new sign hung up in post.
So
So these are going to be posted, or are last year's season pass holders going to be notified? Is there going to be some sort of communication effort made to our leagues and our season pass holders from last year about this change?
So this change is just a non-resident.
Oh, we're just adding,
Yes, it's just a non-resident option. There's no changes.
there's no changes to the residents. So
Yes,
this is,
this is non-residents only.
but there are non-residents that could be senior pass holders from last year, correct? Yeah, so I would hope that we would have some way to notify them before it actually goes into effect, unless there's already the expectation that many folks have purchased their passes for this year.
That's a great question. I could follow up with Ryan to see how many non-residents that are currently bought passes.
Mhm.
Follow up.
Jake, if you can speak into the mic a little closer.
I can follow up with Ryan and see how many of those we have.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I think the intent was these are effective January 1. We had talked about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, because there was discussion of trying to get them in effect. Some folks have been probably purchasing passes. Some of this, I know that a lot of the senior community around there gets on it pretty quick. I would imagine, well, I'll stop there. I think they're effective January 1. If not, there's probably going to be a bunch of upset folks who wish they didn't buy a pass in January.
I know that was what we talked about because we specifically talked about refunding people who had already
Right.
paid once these went into effect for anything that maybe more such, really the main thing is the trail fee.
Yeah, and we,
The trail fee is the one that would be the refundable.
yes, and we've discussed that.
element.
We've made that decision to not even given the option of a shop credit, just issue a refund check. difference.
But to the point, I think the sooner we can implement these, it's the better for everybody, for whoever is waiting to make any decisions about golf issues out on the course.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, as long as the junior add-on fee was a non-resident fee as well, a change to that fee. I want to make sure all the changes are to non-residents. That wasn't super clear to me. the first change was, the second change was the junior add-on fee was going to $330 from $530.
It was originally $299.
And is that for non-residents?
So that's not included in the non-resident fee.
I'm sorry. I think we're maybe talking past each other. I'm just trying to make sure any changes from the document that was posted for the public are changes to non-resident fees.
The two typos that you corrected, are those typos that impacted non-resident fees?
Just the senior couple. Yeah, just the senior couple restricted pass. Not the junior add-on.
Thought it was a non-resident.
So it's written.
So I'm gonna maybe step in and help out. The season passes are the only ones that are getting a non-resident fee. The other fees are anybody, resident, non-resident. So the junior is a resident fee. It got noticed too high. It's actually lower. What was the one that went up? Okay, is that non-resident only? No.
We have that currently now as an option for anybody. So what we've done is we've taken all those passes that we currently have and we're adding 10% to those and we're calling a non-resident pass.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I mean, sounds like it's going to take you guys a little bit of time anyway to update the signage, get communications going. So do you feel like you could take those steps, get direction from council, and then we could get this cleaned up in a couple of weeks? That would be my preference. I'm not going to vote against it. I understand it's in our best interest to get it out there. This is sort of like good hygiene thing. Like, I just feel like if we have something that's not accurate for the public, that is material, then it would be in our best interest to just correct it and then vote on it. That's just me.
Councilman Governor.
Mr. Mayor, I think we started with good intentions and this is turned into a little bit of a bunch of knots. And so I think it is better, bring it back to something that's clean, that makes sure we're all looking at the same thing, talking about the same thing, approving the same thing. So I don't think that was a motion from Councilmember Strader. Unless anyone has any other comments, I'm happy to make a motion. I guess we still have a public hearing that's technically open.
Correct.
So I guess I won't be making any motions until we at least had the opportunity to conclude a public hearing if needed.
And it sounds like you wishing to continue the public hearing?
Yep. Mr. Mayor, that would be my intention.
So do I have a motion to continue the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Governor.
I move that we continue the public hearing on the proposed 2023 Lakeview Golf Course fee schedule from the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department. And Jake, maybe just a request, when you put this back as an agenda item, it might be beneficial for council to give us a master list of the golf course fees so council can see the stuff that we've already approved as well as what's being proposed. So we're all on the same page. Great. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Steve.
We have a motion, second,
Second the motion.
motion a second, and it was a date identified. I don't think it was.
2 weeks.
2 weeks,
February
session.
7th.
7th.
7th work session. Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
second agree,
Second agrees.
discussion, Councilman Holden.
Mr. Mayor, this is related to that. Up next is the resolution for adopting this fee, so we'll pull that off. And in reading that, in section 3, this resolution shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its adoption or approval. So it sounds like that will be on the 7th if we move forward with this action. So just so you're aware.
Do you want to, can you make it retro, Mr. Neri? No.
We can't put them, we can't go retro of these fees. You have to always going.
On that, Mr. Mayor, on that point, are we okay to, if anyone has purchased a 2023 season pass, particularly a trail fee or something where it's going down intentionally, our intent has been to refund that. We've kind of talked about that since last month. Want to make sure we're clear that we're okay to do that.
That requires separate action by council to,
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no, I think if that's the council's direction, I think probably would be wise to at least have a motion and vote on that direction to the staff, and then they can manage the refunds.
Because passes, Mr. Mayor, went on sale in November, not just
Right.
January 1. So I just want to make sure we're okay to refund any that are related to the 2023 season.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I think what we can do is when this is back on the agenda and we vote on it, if you can have a number saying, okay, this is what to date, these many passes have been sold, that will be refunded. So we can agree on, yeah, and then make the motion then.
Trail pass, that's the only thing, because
Trail
nothing
pass.
else is going down, only trail passes in this regard. Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second discussion. We'll say is ended. Is all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Guys have it, and the public hearing is continued. Thank you. So with that, do we have a motion on item 8?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
question for Mr. Neri, is this, we would just turn this down or just withdraw this until the 7th?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Hoagland, we can go ahead and remove this, just move to vacate it, because we're going to create a new one with the new numbers.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we vacate resolution number 22-2367.
I have a motion and a second to vacate resolution 22-2367. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is vacated. Okay, moving on to item 9, Parks and Recreation Department Master Plan Update. Turn this over to Mr. Sedway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We were before you in December, right before Christmas, with the presentation of the majority of the content of the master plan. We had a Word version that was part of your packet then. What the only main change from what was in your packet in December and now is that this one's been beautified, with titles and photos and things, and then the addition of the appendix. We took the full version to the commission 2 weeks ago. They have made a formal recommendation to the city council for approval. Our intent is to present this to you tonight, gather any changes that you may have seen or found. And then we will bring this back to you for action with a resolution on the consent agenda for the 7th. At least that's our proposal to you. So it's not an action item tonight as much as just seeking your direction for any questions, changes, and then we'll bring it back on the 7th with a resolution for approval. When we were before you in December, one of the main questions we got was from Councilwoman Perot about what's the main changes from 2015 to 2023. We have added a section at the end of the executive summary addressing that exact question, and Art's going to talk about that tonight. So we wanted to let you know that we did take that question to heart, and we'll be talking about that here shortly. With that, I am going to turn the time over to Art Thatcher with Barry Dunn.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening. How are y'all tonight?
Well,
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate the time. And again, as Steve said, we are kind of in the last stages of this master planning process. I've got a short presentation, really kind of focusing on the accomplishments between 15 and this current plan. But just to kind of recap for anybody that might be watching, here's the process that we went through. I'm not going to read every one of those, and we're kind of down in this final January timeframe of this final approval and then ultimate adoption. As you remember, we did all of our information gathering, all of our data collection. We looked at those recurring themes that had come out of that, connectivity in the community, maintaining your maintenance level of service, finding new locations for parks, keeping up with your changes in demographics, looking at a new community recreation center is the greatest need in the community, pathways and trails, greatest outdoor facility need, shades and communication were kind of those top areas that if addressed would increase participation. And then email and social media kind of being the top two ways that that your citizens prefer to receive their information on programs and services. And so as we looked at this and in the back of the executive summary, these are in more of a little paragraph form, but just to kind of highlight, based on the recent fee study that was completed, 120.9 acres of parkland will be needed to maintain your current 13.14 acres per thousand residents, as well as 22,827 square feet of indoor space will be needed over the life of this. So over the next 10 years to maintain your 0.59 square feet per thousand population that was adopted in that fee study. This incorporates all of the relevant tactics from the citywide strategic plan in our actions and our goals, objectives, and actions. It confirms that the highest priority is an indoor recreation facility. And also the highest priority is outdoor recreation is new pathways.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pro.
can I ask a question about that slide?
Sure.
So we talk about number of acres desired per thousand, and that 3 is where we currently stand and 4 is kind of the ideal for the size of city. Can you give us just a quick synopsis of how 4 acres per thousand came to be kind of the standard, and also whether we took into account all of the parks in the valley and looked at that ratio as well? I mean, we sit in the middle of several different cities, and a lot of folks go back and forth between using recreation facilities in different cities. So are we looking at this just in our city of Meridian, or are we taking a valley-wide look at those ratios to see where that puts us in relationship to all of the options that our residents have for recreation?
So this looks at the city of Meridian only. It doesn't look at those outside. And this 3.4, 3.14 and 0.59 were established as part of your development fee. And so in 2015, we set the 4 acres as a reach goal. That's what the council at the time and the Parks and Recreation Department, and we at the time, the national average was 7 acres per thousand. So we knew going from the 3.14 to 7 was too much. So we thought if the reach goal would be 4. And so we still have in this master plan that reach goal of 4, but maintaining at least the 3.14. And in this plan, different than 2015, we did account for private HOA acreage. But we do, as we look at where we recommend new development, we do look at surrounding parkland, both municipal as well as state. And so if there's a Nampa Park that's right on the border and it looks like a low service area, we're not going to recommend you put a park there. That answer? Is that okay? And so kind of to finish this up, park sites, you've grown from 21 park sites to 25 park sites between 15 and 23. The number of components that you have within the parks, so those are your picnic shelters, your ball fields, your tennis courts, pickleball courts, those things, those components. In 2015, you had 207 components within your system. You now have 256 components within your system. I think some of the great piece is that the percentage of residents that are now within walkable access to a recreation component has increased from 50% of your population in 2015 to 68%, which speaks highly of the work that you've been doing as a community and the development that has occurred. And then again, we've identified through the inventory 260 additional acres of parkland from your homeowners associations and private recreation providers, which has been added into your database. And so there's the kind of the highlights of the plan. Last time I was here, I went through, kind of more in detail how we got there. And so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Councilman Overman, it's nice to see you.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
Art, I just had a question when we looked at adult participation in outdoor recreation and has a whole list of things. And it looks like it's more than just what our parks offer when you talk about hunting and different things like
Yes, sir.
that, hiking, of course. I was just kind of curious. It talked about Frisbee, 4.4%. I thought, okay, that could also equate to disc golf and whatnot. But I was just wondering, I was just surprised I didn't see pickleball or cornhole pop up because that's something our Parks Department has been involved with a little more. So,
Correct. So that data comes from Esri, and Esri has not caught up with current trends. They do not track pickleball and some of the other current trends, as well as, unfortunately, Esri only tracks participants 25 and older. And so that's why we add some other pieces in there.
yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, so pickleball, definitely all ages. In fact, a lot
Yes.
more older adults are playing that.
Absolutely.
Tennis, I think, for many. So,
So everybody kind of thinks pickleball is that senior activity. The National Pickleball Association just came out with their recent data. The average age of a pickleball player is now 47 years old. So it's not the senior anymore.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Strayer.
Yeah, just two things. One, I thought that the alternative uses for the golf course section was really interesting and that we should look at that if there are additional revenue streams that we could try to monetize from use of our golf course, whether it's, I don't know if people currently have the ability to hold a wedding there or whatever, but there were some suggestions, maybe in the off season, the disc golf kind of stuff would work. I don't know the details. I'm not a golfer either. So, but I thought we should take advantage of those recommendations, at least look at them. And then last time we talked about trends, I thought the report did a good job outlining emerging trends that apply to Meridian. But you guys did mention that you provided a separate trends report to the Parks Department. Is that something that you could make available to council?
Absolutely.
Super. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
few questions. Art, one, it's great seeing you. I feel like we should be giving you an office here as often as you're in Meridian. I appreciate you being here. Always appreciate your insight. I want to start first with, I guess, maybe the recommendations that are in the report. Are those listed in order of priority from yours or the department standpoint, or what was the rationale as to why some things were closer to the top and others were closer to the bottom?
I'd have to look at the report again, but yes, in most cases, I think if you look at the time frame, the short terms are towards the top, midterms kind of fall down further in that. So in general terms, yes, the higher was more priority from what we heard.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe a request that as well. I think figure 12, which demonstrates the revenue from expenses, which I think is really beneficial, but is only really encapsulated in kind of a COVID season. This is as much, I think, for Steve as for you. I think for a final report, I'd like to see a 8 or a 10-year breakdown as opposed to 3 years to really show what our expenses and revenue have been both before and after the pandemic. I just think that's a structural change when we're putting this out to the public. We're not just talking about the last 3 years, we're really looking at the totality. So I think that's on page 55 and figure 12.
So
Good.
So if we went from 2015, which was the last master plan, to 23,
Yeah.
and that's like 7 years.
I think that's fair. I think that makes sense. I want to get past, I don't always feel that the last
completely
few
understand.
years is the best example for us to say this is what reality is. I think it's a moment in time. One of the things that was a little bit of a head scratcher that you can maybe help me see from your expertise is, I think in section 6.0, when we're talking about city needs and what we deliver, aquatics and splash pad were grouped together.
Mhm.
I see those as completely separate type of offerings. The costs associated with it are dramatically different. And I think the report says, hey, we need one more of these. And I would imagine if I'm a citizen who's looking at this, or I want to get involved in our community, I'm likely going to think aquatics as pool and splash pad being an addition to that pool. And so it just, help me understand why you guys group those together as opposed to separate them out, because to me, it seems so different from each other. Well, they both use water. The roles they serve, it just seems different.
They do serve completely different roles,
Okay.
but the aquatic industry groups them all into one group, aquatic facilities. I do agree that splash pads are much more efficient and are installed at a much greater rate than pools. And in a lot of cases, I mean, what we heard from the general public was the need for another swimming pool. But at the time that we were doing this was at the same time that you were purchasing the pool.
Yeah.
And so, as we kind of came back with findings and those things, we made that clear to the public that was there, that you've fulfilled that piece with this pool. That was a step in the right direction to add that. And that, considering, putting splash pads in your parks is more efficient and really gets more use. I mean, they're heavily used.
Sure.
Where a 25 yard 8-lane pool doesn't necessarily get as much use as the splash pad would, because people don't swim laps as much as they used to.
Okay. And then maybe my last question is, and this is where I'm going to have some hesitation about getting behind this master plan, and maybe we can either add some data or you can explain the why to me. Section 7, talking about goals. So as a council member, I go through this report and it's saying, here's what our community needs, here's what we have, here's what we're improving, here's where we're going, and we get to goals. And I get really excited about that. But literally almost every item that's on there when it comes to a cost is either 0 or to be determined. And to me, when I was reading that, I almost felt like I was hitting this like cement wall of like, okay, I've bought into all of this. Here's our goals. You've got to give us some, and they got to give the community some ballpark as to cost. And to me, it seems like this master plan is lacking because you've got the column for it, but there's almost no data. And so help me understand why. How can we, if we're bringing forth a finished product, can we put ballpark numbers in there? Is there reluctance or hesitation to do that? Help me understand.
Well, in those that are kind of to be determined, in most cases, they will require a next step. So, where, like what we did with this master plan, the community wanted a community center.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did, as part of this, we did a conceptual plan for that. And then, I'm sorry, we didn't do the conceptual plan. We did the feasibility study. So, which is kind of a deeper dive into that. And so based on the size, the function of that is really what drives the cost. So, because we don't say you need a 10,000 square foot recreation center. It would be determined at a future date. And I think if you kind of look in the write-up of those recommendations, it talks about doing a feasibility study to determine those. And so that's why a lot of those don't have, figures in them, or, it, depending on when you implement them. So adding new trails, based on the size of the trail, the use of the trail and the materials that you're going to use, the cost is going to change. And what I didn't want to put in there was it's going to cost you between, $100 to $500 a linear foot
Yeah.
to do it.
But Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Councilman Cavanagh.
the rub of that is that I also think the cost also determines if this is something that we could financially support. So to the pathways, I think this council has been super supportive of pathways. I think that's where our extra dollar should go, is into pathways. But if it suddenly was $5,000 a linear foot or something like that, we might say, whoa, let's press pause. But we're being asked to adopt a master plan that calls for a lot of goals, some ambitious, some right in line with what we've been doing. I feel to a degree that's certain signaling to the community that these are our priorities. These are the things that we're going to do. But if they are cost prohibitive, are we are we providing expectations to the public that we may not be able to meet at a later point in time? And I know how much the department relies on this master plan. And I'm worried about this section being included because it's a little audacious without there having, even ballpark costs associated with it. I would struggle as a council member to say, I support this plan when the vast majority of the projects that are called within that are goals don't even have a ballpark price tag next to them. So just, I guess, food for thought for our director who's in the room and you included this section because you believed it was beneficial. And so just, I think feedback, I think it's like a sandwich without any meat. It's just that we're missing, I think, a very critical component of it. And I've got some additional questions. I don't want to belabor our time. I'm going to follow up with the Parks Director about some of the other objectives and just get some better clarification before this is back before us.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
So Councilman Cavanagh, to be clear, are you advocating that it be removed, or are you advocating that they provide us with some additional information, or are you going to have discussions regarding both and come back and let us know what you think?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
It's a fair question that I'm probably not the best person to answer. Is I would hope that the department could provide costs associated to be determines. Again, that's the vast majority of the cost estimates that are provided for each of these objectives. If we can't answer that, then to me, I don't think that should be included as part of the master plan report. That's just my opinion on that.
Okay, I'll work with Steve and we'll look at that. And if we determine that we really can't come up with, we can take that column out.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I think to the extent you can provide it, I think it's really helpful. But part of it is also setting a vision and then time frame. And so I think if we view the time frame as the flexible component toward achieving those goals, then that to me is relevant. So, for example, a lot of people think that a community center should be a high priority for us, but we've been paying for a lot of things lately. It may take us longer to get toward that goal, right? So to me, it's really the variable would be the time frame. And so to the extent that that's a lever that we can pull to achieve those goals and that vision, I think that that's helpful. What time frame into the future is this plan meant to cover? When is the next time we would need to do another one of these?
So the life of a master plan is typically 10 years. So this one is set up as 10 years. Normally at 5 years, there's an update, which is what we're kind of doing with this one. So, next would be 5 years from now, would be, kind of to, especially as fast as the community is growing. The needs assessment piece is just verifying that the community is, and we don't have to do, you don't have to do, I say like, I'm going to come back. I'd love to, but you don't have to do a statistically valid survey every 5 years. You can do a community survey, in the next go round to look at that needs assessment. And then every 10 years, do the statistically valid one.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, and to the extent that our needs change or our community grows differently, we may or may not need to do that update. But I guess I would say as you're putting cost estimates and, you can caveat it however you want, right? Based on maybe today's information because costs change all the time. But, if there are goals that are clearly unachievable in 10 years, then that wouldn't make sense, right? So I think if we keep that time frame in mind, it doesn't bother me to have some ambiguity, but I appreciate you taking a crack at it because I think the more information we have, the better.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If there's anybody else who has an opportunity first, Councilman Cavanagh.
I'd hate to miss the opportunity. I know in objective 2.5, it talks about getting more parkland. I couldn't support that more. I'm excited, but another opportunity to make the case. I think our next park needs to focus on farming and agriculture and really having a park that celebrates our agricultural heritage. So where you're here and the Parks Director, all the councils here in alive and in living color, I would hate to miss that opportunity to make the case that that's where I think we need to go next. So just my unsolicited opinion.
Don't we have one of those currently? At a Cherry and McDermott? That's still an active farm?
We have it. It's an active farm. We also have Hillsdale Park, which is designed to celebrate our agricultural heritage. It's got tractor playground, but I don't know if you're talking about a working farm park or something like that, but we did make a conscious effort to celebrate our agricultural heritage at Hillsdale.
I recognize that McDermott was that's not what it's intended to be long-term. Sorry. Didn't mean to derail. Councilman Overton.
I don't think your mic's on.
Dean, we okay? Okay, I'll try this one. Yeah, I can hear that one. So as a new guy on the block, trying to play catch up on everything that's going on with this extensive comprehensive plan. I've had the opportunity, being the new liaison to parks, to spend quite a bit of time with the director, with Steve, and meet several of his people in the parks and go around and discover that there's a lot I didn't know. And when we put together a plan such as this, what blew me away was my real lack of knowledge. And I think we got a lot of people in the city that know even less than me when it comes to our parks and activities and the diversity of things that we offer today. I had no idea that I would walk into the home court and find pickleball being played from wall to wall with standing groups of people waiting for the courts to empty to have their turn. I had no idea. We went to the golf course and looked at all the improvements that we're doing. Obviously, there's expenses with us bringing it up to our standards from where it was. Looked at the new pool that we've taken on, and again, looked at the costs associated with bringing it up to our standards of what clean is and being ready to go. I guess I don't get as caught up in knowing exactly what these future costs are going to be, because for so many years, all those were the best guesses we could give. And we're really trying to look at what our vision and goals are going to be. If you look 2 years ago at what costs were to get things done, they've changed dramatically in the past 24 months due to a whole bunch of things that were out of our control. So I really appreciated the way that this was written as a guideline, as a vision for where we want to have our parks department. We might not have a good handle on what those costs are going to be, but we're going to be addressing every one of those costs as they come through down the road anyway. So it's amazing piece of work. I really appreciate all the work that you put into it, especially looking at the changes from 2015 to 2022. I cannot believe the amount of different amenities we have on our parks today. Going, when I look back at when it was just usually a soccer field, baseball field, and we had a little bit of a playground. We offer a whole lot more to our citizens now than we ever did before. And I'm absolutely was blown away the other day. And I got to thank Steve again for doing that. I mean, I know that was your intention and you knocked it out of the park. But for the purposes of this, I just don't want to get myself, I don't want to get too caught up and worried about costs that we could be talking so many years down the road. We're going to be talking about them again. And if we try to lock in a cost today, we might not even be in the right ballpark of where we're going to see down the road.
Mr. Mayor.
Council, any additional questions? Are Mr. Sedway?
The reason why I walked over to the mic a while ago was to talk about the costs. I would be hesitant to add costs myself to this plan for a couple of reasons, and maybe that column just shouldn't be there. But this is meant to be a 10,000. This is a vision document. And we have a tool to get that we use for costing, and that's the CFP. I think the question for this is, do you want us to develop costs for these types of goals to bring into the CFP and see where, how, or if they fit? The CFP is our costing tool, and a lot of development will need to be done in order to get a number to bring into the CFP. And I worry that any number that we pull at this high of a level is just going to be wrong. So that's my 2 bits for this level of a plan. This is just meant to set the course and the direction, and what do you want us to develop to bring into those costing discussions is kind of where I see it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Steve, I appreciate that. I think this was just more of a response of, clearly it was included for some reason. I don't know what that reason is. I guess I would like to know. And if it's, because I hear you, we're like to speculate how much farmland's going to be to buy to turn into a park 6 years from now is a best guess. But you guys are the experts. You put it in there for a reason. And so I guess that's the part. Why do we include that? Maybe be the better answer.
It was part of their template. It was included in the 2015 plan. This is not a great answer, but it was in the 2015 plan. This was an update. And so it remained in. It's that simple. It didn't have much more thought than that from me.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Council, any additional questions or comments? Or Steve, final wrap up comments on next steps, desires, wishes?
Yeah, so I tried taking some notes. The alternative uses at the golf course, look into, that's kind of a future thing, no changes to the master plan. Get the trans report to the council. We can do that, not a change to the master plan. We need to figure out, based on the figure 12 revenues and expenses, if there was any change to the master plan for that, or if that's just an additional analysis you'd like to have done. I didn't hear any change to the aquatic splash pads. I think that was clarified. I think we need to take out the cost column for the goals section. I do like having the goals section as kind of our aspirations based on the feedback we heard from the public. We'd had a specific change from Councilman Hoagland that was just in an email. It didn't come up tonight, but we will, a Scrivener's error on a missing decimal point. We will make that change. And it sounds like Councilman Cavanagh may have some similar things, and anything that you found that is a grammatical error or anything like that, we're happy to change. So my intent is to gather any and all of these corrections, changes, get them to Art ASAP, and get them submitted for the February 7th agenda. It would be my goal. So With that, I appreciate the conversation. I really appreciate that you guys took the time to take this seriously and look at it. I love that you spent the time reading. This is a big deal for us, right? I mean, that's why we do this, is to talk with our citizens, to talk with you, to talk within the department. It's a great tool to facilitate those conversations, to talk about our priorities, to get that vision, to help us lay the course for the next 5 to 10 years. It's really important work. It's been great working with Art on this over the past year. Appreciate your attention to detail. And I think that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Steve. So council, at least know if you have any additional things by the end of this week would probably be preferred, so they can try to get it fully up and loaded into the agenda for the 7th for the community to see any of those changes as well. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very much. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Okay, next item up is item 10, community development. Ada County Highway District Integrated 5-Year Work Plan Priorities. Miranda, nice to see you. Start the morning with you and end the day with you.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, council members. So we talked a little bit, I think it was 2 weeks ago, might have been last week, about community programs in the city and how we come up with those community programs. So in your packet is our requests for ACHD for our roads and intersections and our community programs. So each year, last year being an odd exception, ACHD invites partner agencies to submit transportation requests or in priority order that they then scope and program. So we make up 15% of the scoping that they do. There are several elements. Our input makes up 15% of that scoping. And so before you, and I updated the document slightly from what was in your packet for clarification. Everything in green is what ACHD has already programmed. So everything in green already has money attached to it. Everything that's white in the agency project name column is what's unprogrammed at this time. So the Transportation Commission had a subcommittee meet and review the roads and intersections and the community programs projects, really dive into each individual project. And as you'll see, there's a lot of those. They spent several hours going into each project, looking at the merit of the projects, what changes may need to be added compared to past requests. That's what the red in the columns is. That's where the project description was updated from the request 2 years ago. And they prioritized requests and sent them to the Transportation Commission as a whole. That commission then spent another 2 months looking at the requests over the course of those months and meeting twice on that to finalize their recommendation to council. So what's in your packet is the efforts from those meetings, as well as efforts with staff, being myself, meeting with Parks staff and with West Ada staff. And those projects that were Parks preferred are highlighted in the far left column yellow. And the projects that were West Ada preferred are highlighted in blue. There are 3 additional projects highlighted in blue than what were in your packet on Locust Grove. So I did want to call your attention to those, as well as there are some orange projects highlighted in that far left column. Those are non-ACHD projects. So those are not projects we're requesting from ACHD. We're doing them either through city grants, city processes, development agreements, or through ITD process. So at this time, I'll stand for any questions or recommendations.
Thank you. Council, questions for Miranda?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
I have a couple questions. So wanted to understand, and I had sent this, by the way, to the police department. But to be fair, sent it to them like yesterday. So I wanted to know, who are we getting input from besides the Transportation Commission from within the city? understanding there may be some things in the works in terms of getting interagencies together or potential things in the future. What is the timing in terms of when does this prioritization need to go to ACHD? Is there a deadline? And then I have a few other questions too.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader. So this needs to be to ACHD by February 15th. So the desire would be that we meet, we being you all meet tonight, discuss any changes that need to be made, and then come back. I'll come back to the February 7th meeting with hopes that we would finalize so that we can write a letter and get that submitted by ACHD's deadline, February 15th. I recognize that that's a tight window. The process from beginning to end, because it does involve so many coordination meetings, is a tight window every year. As far as police involvement, we do have a traffic sergeant on the Transportation Commission. That's Corporal Randy Goodspeed, and he's invited to participate in these conversations as well. There was not separate meeting with police.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
Okay, and just a couple more then. So one question I had was, and I think maybe you've actually explained it now. I thought it was interesting that the community programs was sort of separated out from some of these comments in red in the prioritization of road projects. We were calling out pedestrian improvements. So I sort of just wanted to understand the interplay. It sounds like maybe you could just confirm quickly, the red comments are additions that are new.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, the red comments are new from last year, or I'm sorry, from 2 years ago. So when we did this 2 years ago, some of those comments were listed only in the community programs section. They were not listed in the roads and intersections section. As ACHD has changed some of their processes, it seems like they're including more of those crossings, pathways, things like that in their roads and intersections projects that we coordinate with them on. And so I wanted to make sure that we had those requests in when they went in to do their scoping, that they knew in advance that we'd be requesting those. Some of those you'll also find are duplicated in the community programs section, because perhaps ACHD has an opportunity to do those separately, but I really wanted to just cover the bases and saturate it with as much pedestrian safety as I could.
Got it. Yeah, I just, I guess a couple overarching comments. One comment was, I just wanted to make sure that the police department could have some time to take a look at this, because they keep all the crash data, they keep all the information about, all of that, right? And they have access to it. So I understand that Randy is on the Transportation Commission, but I just want to make sure, Chief, you guys have adequate time, and Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, if he could comment on whether they can take a look at this as well.
I think Chief, I'll let you answer that question.
We're trying to, yeah, we can look at this and review it, but we are mapping out the pedestrian vehicle accidents over the last 5 years. It'll probably take us close to a 12-day period to get all of those mapped out, but they're working on that assignment now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
I really appreciate that. And I know that's really time consuming, but if anything pops out as a conclusion from that, that seems like, oh, wow, we didn't realize, but this really needs to be a higher priority because we have a ton of crashes in one area. Please elevate that. For us, that'd be super. And then I guess the other question I had, Miranda, was just 12 and 13 were highlighted as a higher priority by West Data. Do you have any kind of rationale? Do they want to see the whole McMillan corridor as a higher priority for any particular reason? Is this an Owyhee High School driven thing, or kind of what causes the different prioritization from that agency?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, at this point in time, I believe on the McMillan Lenser to Meridian, it was in regards to Heritage Middle School. I don't have the map. Apologize, I didn't print the map.
That is where it's at. So
the projects that they said they preferred were very close to schools in most cases. They also noted that they generally prefer bikeway projects. So everything in the community programs, they were essentially supportive of all the community programs projects, but they called out the ones that were higher priorities for them, and those are highlighted in blue.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
I think Chief Bloom's been sending me some hand signals. Is there something you wanted to share with us?
Councilman Perot, no, I think I was just talking to Tracy. I was trying to figure out how we could end up with a representative on the Transportation Commission from fire. That was it.
I think we can make that happen.
We are interested.
Thank you.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So Miranda, I guess a couple questions. In years past, the Transportation Commission has seen this and they've brought forth recommendations before it lands to us. Do I understand that we're not necessarily following that same process any longer? Or did I misunderstand?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, no, I'm sorry. This is the recommendation from Transportation Commission. So there was not a letter produced. They made a motion at their last meeting to recommend the list as it is in front of you to the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Well, they didn't make any changes and they recommended it as it was submitted to them.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, that is not correct. This list is changed from 2 years ago. If that's your question. When I brought the list to them, I got the list from ACHD in the order that we had created it 2 years ago that had been recommended by the council at that time. That list was then altered based on meetings with Parks and West Ada. That went to the Transportation Commission Prioritization Subcommittee. They reordered again based on my planning staff, Parks and West Ada. And then that list went to Transportation Commission, who then made more changes and recommended it to you.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman
I think the
Cavanagh.
reason why I'm asking is that what I would hate is, let's say they bring forth something that let's just say community programs, item 7. So sidewalks at Bauer and Meridian Road. And let's say that was higher on our list and they moved it down, or it was lower on our list and they moved it up. I want to take at least some of that into consideration before we adopt anything, kind of just knowing where. So I think for future reference, when we're getting this, if we could see this is where it was, this is the Transportation Commission's recommendations, that helps me get a little flavor for where our commission is kind of focusing on what their efforts are. That said, I kind of picked number 6 on accident, but also on purpose. You know, this is a top priority that is not funded or planned at the highway district. And I think the whole purpose that we have this is to have these projects that we know from our community rise to the level of design and construction. Do we know the reason why sidewalks for our downtown residents isn't something the highway district is necessarily as enthusiastic about designing and constructing? I mean, is there a holdup on the highway district's part? Have we not done a good enough job of being advocates for our downtown residents? Why is that one, kind of high on our list, but doesn't necessarily have any plans in the 5-year work plan?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Straight, sorry.
I take that as a
Cavanagh.
huge compliment.
So I will say, in the years since I've started working at the city, and I don't know how ACHD handled it before, since I've started working at the city, I've been involved in several residential capital maintenance projects, which is a grouping of residential sidewalk projects that the city or that ACHD does. So when they go in to do capital maintenance in neighborhoods now, they include sidewalks and ADA improvements in those. That's a change that they made, I'll say recently, but I mean that in the last 5 or 6 years. They haven't always included sidewalks and ADA improvements in those, but they do now. So we'll start seeing the fruits of that effort being constructed. There's been a few already constructed in downtown Meridian and near Meridian Middle School. They're kind of the slower, more residential projects. You might not notice them right away unless it's in your neighborhood. I was lucky enough to have some in my neighborhood, so I noticed them right away. But those improvements are being made regardless of where they fall on our list, but we want them on our list so they can rise to the top.
Fair enough. Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Holland.
One item, and I brought this up before, and I'm just surprised that nothing is on the list unless I missed it somewhere. But again, Black Cat at Compass School near the intersection of Franklin Road. There is no turn lane going into that school, and I'm surprised West Ada has not done anything. And they all have right of way. The house has been moved back. They've cleared that ground going from Franklin Road north on Black Cat to that intersection to the school. The new development has come in. They have given right of way for that to go all the way to the railroad tracks. And with Pine, if you go onto the north side of the tracks on Black Cat, Pine Avenue, that's now going to be punched through all the way from 10 Mile. There's no turn lane, nothing scheduled, is going to be another huge bottleneck. It already is for the school in the mornings. You just want to avoid that area if you can. So I just befuddled that something like that isn't on here. So anyway, I think Councilwoman Perot is very familiar with that as well, because I remember her also mentioning that last time.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Thank you very much, Council President. Yes, there is an application that's come before us for Newkirk subdivision that we haven't heard yet. Of course, we will, but that will complete that collector road that's going to go from Franklin to Black Cat. And once that's done in the next 3-ish, 4 years, it's that collector is going to be heavily traveled and it's going to pop out right next to the school. I mean, like closer to the school than most of our collectors. And I think we'll see similar issues that we've seen with Pleasant View on Gondola, where we're going to have speeding challenges. We're going to have left turn lane challenges. We're going to have all those similar types of issues right there. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Barton.
so if it's not in there, is this not, why don't we put it in there? Is there a reason we don't reference it and just drop it in right now somewhere, somehow?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, we can definitely do that. If the council has a preference for where it lands, we can put it in. I can add it and bump all the numbers down so that you'll see it the next time that I come before you in February.
Can I say something? Please, I believe it is on there on number 59, a widening from Franklin to Cherry Lane, but it's not, there's no date or anything on it like that.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. I did not go past page 2 because once you get past page 1, towards the bottom of page 1, there's no dates for anything. So. And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Holston.
just to comment on that, I mean, we have a lot of need. ACHD has a lot of demand and we're trying to push things, but you know, it's about what, 3, maybe 4 projects that get started in a year for our community. And when you look at a list like this, and so, okay, let's say we say Black Cat is going to be number 17 or whatever number we would put that in, it's years and years and years out. So I just, it's a little discouraging when you do this exercise because we're just hoping, hey, the top 3 projects can start being done. And when we say start, they talk about a 5-year work plan. Well, that might mean in 2 years, they'll do design. And then 2 years later, they're going to, well, the next year they might start right away acquisition, and then they might start construction 2 years after that. So there's a huge gap in there.
Mr. Mayor.
It's not a criticism of ACHD. It's the animal that we all have to deal with, but it's difficult.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, that is very true. And when you say there are a lot of projects on this list, that is not an understatement. We went through all 65 roads and intersections and all 54 community programs really diving into each project. And I will say that once you hit about number 30 on the roads and intersections project, numbers 31 through 65, you could almost just rate them all as number 31. Once you hit about number 30, you are losing the scoping points that you get from ACHD. They have a point system that they apply. And so at that point, there isn't a lot of fruits that are going to come from the effort of ranking projects 31 through 65 in any particular order. So that is, I just want to say it with that caveat. The fact that it's number 59 doesn't mean that it's less than number 31. It honestly means that it's just less than number 30.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
that said, could we move that item up though to like number 27?
You can do whatever you want.
Council feel comfortable with that? I mean, it moves it until at least the page one. Something that Council Member Perot talked about last year, Councilman Hogan's brought it up here today. Candidly, the Kavanagh family is a contributor to that problem at Black Cat. Pork chop goes there, so I see the impact of that school in the morning and the evening, but if that's something the council wants to court, I would not get in the way of that either.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Brenda, did you happen to have a conversation with the Public Charter Commission about Compass specifically? And if not, do you think we should do that? Because West Ada has been consulted on these, but has the Charter Commission had that same opportunity?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot, no, the Charter Commission has not been approached with this list.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
I don't know a whole lot about their structure, their makeup, but do you think it would be beneficial for us to have that conversation with them before we were to move it that far up in our priority list? What are your thoughts? I mean, you do this every day, so just curious.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot. So I think it would be beneficial. I don't know that it would necessarily be beneficial before this goes forward to ACHD. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the window for this is tight. So realistically, there's a certain number of coordination meetings that can be fit into that time. I can definitely make efforts next year when we do this process to include the charter schools in this process. And then don't want to get ahead of myself, but I will say we're also making other efforts in our department to have a more thorough view of these projects. So we can definitely include discussions with charter schools as part of discussions of charter schools as part of that effort.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
I'm not at all opposed to Councilman Cavanaugh's recommendation, but this intersection has been, just it's not, I haven't brought it up these last couple of years for any reason other than I just get to see it firsthand. So, and all of us, I would hope that the areas that we live in our city would want to bring those things up the same if they saw those challenges. So, but as far as prioritizing it this year, if we don't think that moving it up is going to get it to a priority that's going to be higher than it say it will in 2 years from now, is there a reason to do it this year, or do we wait until the next time we have this conversation?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot. So doing the count, it looks like, I apologize, you have to watch me count. It looks like project number 25 will be the cutoff right now of where our scoping points end. I believe I said 30 before and I'm miscounted, but the top 10 unprogrammed projects are where the scoping points will go. So if we want to see this get scoping points, if we want to see that project, it would need to be in as project 25 as the lowest. And so it's just a matter of council weighing whether you bump the 10-mile Amity to Victory down to bump that project up.
Can you scroll this down?
I do not have.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Miranda, do we know if the improvements at 10 Mile and Victory, the expansion of that intersection, did that alleviate some of the congestion there as it flows then further south? What was do you know what the ranking was the last year? Has that moved up higher?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Pro, I do not know what that ranking was. I apologize. When I bring this back, I will definitely include the 2021 priority ranking. There was not a ranking done in 2022 because ACHD needed to skip a year to redo the methodology, but I can bring in the 2021 ranking. As far as the congestion, I don't have those figures on if the average daily traffic changed or if the level of service changed based on that roundabout, or I'm sorry, based on that intersection improvement.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I mean, considering the ACHD update, if these are recent comments, starting at like number 20, a lot of them, they're saying they're at a D level of service or better, which I have no faith in the levels of service. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different day. But considering that comment, I'd be supportive of moving the Franklin Black Cat project up into the top 10, if not, I think our rationale, at least from the Transportation Commission, was they were going to work on the whole, obviously Linda Road's number one, then it's the whole Locust Grove corridor. Then it seems like we're sort of touching a few different places, McMillan, then Eustick. Then it seems like there's a rationale around Cherry Lane. Because I know that part of the commission's thinking was to do corridors at one time to get things moving, which I think makes sense. So I don't want to disrupt that. But if there's like a natural break in this, like if it's number 23, or even talk to us about the importance of the Cherry Lane activity, I don't see why we wouldn't put it even as like number 20, considering I think we've all got a lot of support for prioritizing that higher.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Schrader. So the Cherry Lane projects were projects that Parks requested be in the programming, in the points level for scoping. So Parks wanted to see those because once a project gets scoped, it can take another 5 years before we even see shovels breaking ground. And there is a park that's planned to go, I believe it was in 2027, not my department, so don't quote me on it, but I believe there's the Cherry Lane Park, I don't remember the exact name of it, is planned out there in 2027. So they were hoping to get those 3 projects scoped to support the traffic that's going to come with that park. Other than that, I would say that the moving it 23, 24, 25, it's just a matter of council determining which project gets bumped out of the scoping, because that's the level where the top 10 unprogrammed are going to get scoping points, and everything below that will get 0 partner agency scoping points.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
I appreciate our Parks Department being forward thinking about that for sure. But as far as the timing of, when improvements will start in the park, I think we're many more years out than we are the need for that Black Cat Franklin intersection. So I'm in favor of moving it up above the parks requests. The U-stick, the roundabout on U-stick and Black Cat is a head scratcher to me because like they have the light in there, it's functioning fine right now. I don't understand why that's on their priority list when that would work for another few years, but they have the transportation numbers and I don't. But definitely south of Cherry to Franklin on Black Cat is in major need of review. No sidewalks, lots of pedestrian activity. So I don't know if you want us to chew on this a little bit longer and have some more conversations and make a motion at the next meeting, or what your thought is about doing it now.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot, I would prefer to get some motions on where to move things so that when I bring you the list at the next meeting, that preferably there will only be maybe 1 or 2 changes at that point, and we can really have it hammered out. I'm also going to hopefully not open Pandora's box, but explaining that the lists, when I talk about the points that we get for scoping, anything that you see in blue will be getting 15 points, which is the highest points it can get because West Data has already said that they're also going to have that on their list. So some of these projects, when I actually send them to ACHD, I'll send this is our council's priority list for all of our projects in the city. And then I'll have a kind of a breakout list that says, this is the order of the projects so that we can optimize our points. So we may actually have what's number 12 right now might actually go down on the unprogrammed request list, just so we can play unfortunately, there is a little bit of a game to play. It's difficult to explain the entire game. There is a little bit of a game to play that those things will take place. So whether you move this above number 20, 21, or 22, they're probably going to end up getting around the same number of points. It's because those blue projects will be bumped down. I'm sorry, I know it's confusing. That's why I said I didn't Pandora's box. It's hard to stand here and explain it. It took me 45 minutes to explain it to the subcommittee. It took ACHD over an hour to explain it to all the partner agencies. Where you want it on the list is the big ticket. If you want that Black Cat U-Stick project moved down, regardless of the fact that it's programmed, we can move that down because we do want to show ACHD if dollars need to be reallocated or projects need to be shuffled, as ACHD often does. And I don't mean that as a dig, but they do often need to shuffle. It's easier for me to already have a list of what the council desires than it is for me to come back to the council every time ACHD does that shuffle and say, where do you want this project now? Where does it rank now? So if the U-Stick Black Cat is a project you want to see moved down and this project moved up, that's an option as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pro.
is ACHD even going to make that consideration considering the design is done? I mean, isn't that kind of a, don't they essentially want to move forward pretty much after design is done?
Mr. Mayor.
Is that going to make a difference?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot, without putting my foot in my mouth, ACHD designs projects and occasionally those designs need to change for various reasons. So I can't say if ACHD is going to change that. I'll also say that a lot of these ACHD updates, design, construction, right-of-way comments weren't necessarily updated before they resent us the list. So these are the comments, the most recent comments I had from them. I don't know if they'll move it, if they'll change it. I can't. I wish I had a crystal ball to predict how they operate, but their scoping and their programming has so many pieces beyond our 15 points. It's very difficult for me to say if they'll move it up or down based on where this council ranks it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
So just for discussion, and I'm just curious people's feedback, if we were to, if there was a motion to just move the Franklin and Black Cat improvement to number 23 and then move everything else back down in the same order, how would folks feel about that? Just trying to see if there's support and frankly, addressing Councilwoman Perot, does that feel like a correct prioritization for that project?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
I'm looking at all of the projects, really number 16 and down, and I don't see the widening of Fairview. It's going to be important, but I mean, I'm not a traffic expert. I don't know what the numbers are for those, but to me, the widening of Fairview 23 and 24 and 25 are not high priorities. That's just my personal opinion. And so if it were me, I think they're higher, it's a higher priority than parks as well. Obviously, number 19 is going to get ranked up based on what Miranda has said. So I would put it at like number 17, above number 17, maybe at 17 and move everything else down. Because U-Stick, the dual lane roundabout, I don't think is a huge priority. However, we already know we've got to do a U-Stick Black Cat to 10 Mile because that has to do with the ACHD facility. So whatever number that ends up being, Miranda, that's where I think it should go, but I'm just one vote.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I think we're in the ballpark. I was thinking number 20. So we're right in that range. So
I'm fine to remove everything with the roundabout. Oh, sorry, Councilman Overton.
Having played with these lists for 15 to 20 years, I know how frustrating it can be. And I've sat at council meetings where we juggled multiple projects up and down that list.
John, can you? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. I think we need to be as aggressive as we can, and we need to remember that we're talking about a traffic problem around a school, not a traffic problem moving cars down a roadway. And I think we need to make those our priorities. We need to remember that if West Ada School District had that school, that would probably already be a shaded block and would already be high up that list. And I don't think you can move it too far up that list and justify it tonight.
Mr. Mayor.
Administrator.
Yeah, I'm kind of tracking with what you're saying as well. You know, I was trying to juggle, do we move it ahead of the Cherry Lane projects or not? I have a little bit of hesitation about moving out the Fairview project, just because if you're talking about the one off of, I believe it's Fairview and Locust Grove, I think the thought was widen that whole corridor along Locust Grove. I don't want to disrupt that rationale. Like, I thought that was a really solid approach. It's already designed and programmed. I don't think we want to mess with something that's already under design and programming personally, but I'd be supportive of moving this project to like number 20. Or even number 19, after everything that's already been kind of programmed, with the exception of number 12 and number 13, I think those should stay, but I'd be okay moving it to anything 19 and later.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borden.
I hear consensus, really I do, that perhaps 20 might be it. This is a multi-year process, right? You put it at 20 for next year's discussion, right? Our scoring is a teeny piece of all of the other components of what they do to rank it. So I think it's a good discussion. Putting it at 20 gets it on everyone's radar for next year's analysis. Which very well might move it up a lot more after projects get completed. So 20 sounds great. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borden.
it necessitates a motion. I will make that motion that Franklin Black Cat, we're calling it, project.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. She'll move it up.
Okay.
I see heads nodding, so I
Yeah.
feel comfortable moving forward with that.
So maybe before the 7th meeting, she'll update the list with this change and provide a list of the changes that occurred from the one that was originally submitted. We'll try to do hopefully someone's really smart and can do a simple merge, look and see the change.
The column is just hidden right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I left it in, it's just hidden. So
Okay, so you
it'll
can
be
at
very
least
simple for me to ask.
see the other changes. If after seeing the other changes, it triggers any further dialogue, I encourage you to reach out to Miranda and let her know prior to it, so that we can at least try to not have to have a conversation at length about anything specific if you already know that in advance in that regards. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pearl.
just want to say thank you to Miranda for this is the most educated I've been about this list since I've been on council. So thank you for all of the information. That is exceptionally helpful. And to Council President Hoagland, because when I looked at the priority of that, I didn't even think it was worth mentioning because it was so far down the list. So thank you for bringing it up and allowing us to have that conversation.
All right. Thanks, Miranda. Which brings us to item 11.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we go into executive session for Idaho Code 74-206, 1D and 1F.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strater,
Aye.
Overton, Burrow,
Aye.
Cavanagh.
Aye.
Morton.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and we will move into executive session.